Welcome to Speak Up and Stay Alive RadiOh with author, speaker, and your host, Pat Rouleau.
Serving you a generous helping of everything you need to know to help you and your loved ones stay safe during any doctor or hospital visit.
The program is not intended to replace medical advice from a licensed professional, but rather to encourage you to become a well-informed participant in your health and well-being. And now, your host, Pat Rouleau.
The patent is long since expired, but they have made about $50 million a year from the ADA's own patent on amalgam filling. And they were eventually brought to court, and in court they said this. They said that they owe no duty of care to the public for any damage caused by amalgam fillings because they do not manufacture or install it. So we all know that the ADA has promoted for dentists the quote-unquote safety of amalgam fillings, and so dentists have been lied to, and yet they say we have no duty of care for the protection of the public. This is how they're getting away with it.
Hello and welcome. I'm Pat Rouleau. So happy to share this time with you as we think about the many ways to stay healthy and safe during every healthcare and hospital encounter. I know I've mentioned to you before that often the inspiration for each week's show topic arrives in many interesting and hidden ways. And many times I get hit with synchronicity, the simultaneous occurrence of events that appear to be related but actually have no discernible connection. I believe this word was coined by Carl Jung. Well, anyway, here's my synchronicity story. Last Sunday at dinner, my mom asked Bob a question about how he made the ribs we were eating, and he didn't respond, but sat there with a weird look on his face, staring at his plate. Mom and I looked at each other, and I repeated her question. Still, he sat there with a curious look on his face while he rolled his tongue around his mouth, and I asked quite loudly, "Are you okay?" To which he replied, "I think I just swallowed my gold crown." Well, that soon began some fun-filled jokes. "Hey, Bob, are you the proverbial goose who lays a golden egg? Are you sitting on a gold mine? Should we bring the metal detector into the bathroom? Will Bob be mining for gold tomorrow morning?" Followed by, "This tooth shall pass." Oh, what fun we had at Bob's expense. But it soon led to a more serious discussion about making a dental appointment, not getting a replacement made with mercury or other metals, xrays, and really the type of conversation and thought that one should give prior to any doctor or dental visit. So it was quite interesting when the next day an article crossed my desk about Crony dentistry, and the following morning I received an email and a phone call from listeners about mercury and dental fillings. Voila, synchronicity, that solidified my discussion for today's show. So later, I have a guest here to talk about mercury dental fillings, why and how they damage our health, and what you can do about it. So let's get to it, because right now, it's time for the healthcare hazard of the week. Say ah. Ah. Crony dentistry once again puts children at risk. That is the title of an article written in the Alliance for Natural Health USA on September 8th, 2015. It says medical device companies appear to be trying to buy dentists, exposing children to high levels of unnecessary radiation. The New York Times ran a story a few years ago illustrating the extent to which cronyism, which is defined as showing partiality to long-standing friends for mutual financial benefit rather than following good science, when cronyism determines medical care, in this instance, dental x-rays. While some doctors try to reduce the amount of radiation children and adolescents are exposed to, dentists have begun using a particular kind of scanner that emits significantly more radiation than conventional methods. The device is called a cone beam CT scanner, and it's used to take three-dimensional images of teeth, supposedly providing dentists with the ability to see problems better. Now, you'll recognize these as they sometimes rotate around your head, or you sit with your head boxed in by the scanners, or there's even a handheld scanner that looks like a megaphone aimed at your head. The Times report that the cone beam's popularity has been fueled in part by misinformation about its safety and efficacy, some of it coming from dentists paid or sponsored by manufacturers to give speeches and seminars and continuing education classes. The Times even reported that the Journal of the American Dental Association allowed one cone beam manufacturer to fund an entire issue devoted to the technology. Now, to regular Pulse Natural News Health newsletter readers, this cronyism may sound all too familiar. We recently reported on some of the latest numbers in the long-established trend of big pharma, paying doctors to promote their products, shelling out millions for doctors to attend conferences in exotic locations like the Cayman Islands, and bankrolling lavish food and beverage tabs, or paying doctors to help with research. One need only follow the money to understand why this happens. In 2010, more than 3,000 scanners and 30 different models had been sold for up to $250,000 apiece. Now, dentists can turn a tidy profit as well, charging up to several $100s per scan. And some orthodontists are also using these cone beam CT scans. The new dental scanners produce anywhere from 4 to 67 times as much radiation as conventional x-rays. Dental scanners are a variant on the CT scanners, the CAT scans that you find in doctors' offices, which on average emit as much as 200 conventional chest x-rays. And if you visit more than one doctor, you may get more and more of these without one doctor having any idea of what the other doctor has done. And young patients are 5 to 10 times more sensitive to radiation than adults. Concerns about radiation exposure are greater for younger patients because they are more sensitive to radiation, and they have a longer lifetime for ill effects to develop. The American Dental Association says that children rarely need them before orthodontic procedures. And several studies have shown that for any given dose of radiation, children are 3 to 4 times more likely than adults to develop malignancies, in part, as I mentioned before, because their cells are more sensitive to radiation. Now, big surprise, the FDA even weighs in on this and recommends that dental professionals discuss the rationale for the examination with the patient and or the parent to ensure a clear understanding of the benefits and the risks. And they suggest that the exposure settings for these exams provide the lowest radiation dose that yields an image quality adequate for diagnosis. It's called ELARA, as low as reasonably achievable. The technique factors used should be chosen based on the clinical indication, the patient's size, and the anatomical area scanned, and the equipment should be properly maintained and tested. Which begs another question. Who is doing the maintaining and testing? And who is monitoring all of this? The dentist? The receptionist? Their attorney? No one? So why is there so much overuse? Well, the main reasons for excessive scanning are, you got it, financial incentives. Most doctors are paid by volume, so they have an incentive to order lots of tests. And many doctors have invested in radiology equipment or clinics. Such physicians order far more scans and other imaging tests, as shown by research. One dentist broke down the economics of his scanner, which cost about $200,000. He said, "We calculated the value of each clinical minute at our practice at approximately $5. And using the cone beam instead of the camera, cut each appointment by at least 30 minutes. That's a $150 in savings," he wrote. And for 1,000 new appointments for braces yearly, that's $150,000 in saving. He said, "Using the cone beam scanner, we treat the same number of patients in a 3-day week that we used to in a 4-day week, which reduces our staff requirements." Another common reason for overuse is fear of lawsuits. Almost 35% of imaging tests are ordered mainly as a defense against lawsuits, not because of true medical need. There's also uninformed physicians, misinformed patients, patients' demand, and lack of regulation. So what should you do? Don't blindly allow your dentist to rush you into accepting this type, or any x-ray for that matter, without a serious conversation about the necessity. Review the benefits and the risks of the procedure before it's performed. Discuss if the imaging exam is necessary and if there are equally useful alternative exams that use no or less ionizing radiation. Ask if the facility uses radiation reduction techniques such as size-based protocols for children. And finally, insist on shielding devices. The shielding devices include a leaded thyroid collar for the protection of the thyroid gland, leaded glasses for the protection of the eye lens, a leaded hat for the protection of the brain, and a leaded apron for the protection of the body trunk. I remember a few years back at a new dentist's office, I asked the gal who was performing my x-ray for a chest shield, as she was ready to hit the button without offering me the shield. She said, "Don't worry, this new machine delivers less radiation." To which I responded, "I'd still like the shield, please." So, bottom line, I'm not suggesting that you forego dental x-rays. I am suggesting that you have a real conversation with your dentist prior to any x-ray, and especially for children or teens prior to getting braces. Be sure you understand and consent to the risk and the benefit choice that you are making. Don't just say, "ah," and bite your tongue. Remember the title of this program. You have to speak up and stay alive. So, Bob, did everything come out all right? There's gold in them there hills.
That's weird.
I'm thinking it's
Only Pat.
Now, let's hear some legal news you can use. Each week, you hear me talk about my friends at the law office of Schraff & King, located in Willoughby Hills, Ohio, and today I want to share just a brief moment about some of their specialties and backgrounds. Pat Schraff is a certified elder law attorney by the National Elder Law Foundation and is one of only a handful within the state of Ohio. Her practice is concentrated in the areas of estate planning and administration, guardianship, probate litigation, and long-term care planning. She is also attorney for the Geauga County Department on Aging's Legal Services Program. Pat has been an integral part of the aging community, serving on the boards of the Long-Term Care Ombudsman, the Alzheimer's Association of Greater Cleveland, and she is currently vice president of the board of the Lake County Council on Aging. David King is an experienced transactional lawyer. He represents closely held businesses, small business owners, and individuals in matters involving business operations and contracts, estate, and succession planning. David is also a member of the litigation section of the Ohio State Bar Association and the Association of Specialists in Aging. John Thomas is on the board of trustees of the Association of Specialists in Aging, which promotes the well-being of older people in Cuyahoga, Lake Geauga, and Ashtabula counties, and he has been named a 2010 Rising Star in Ohio Super Lawyers. So when I suggest that you use these folks to help with your advance directives, medical power of attorney, long-term care planning, estate planning, I do so because that is what they spend their days and nights doing. They have a special interest in aging and elder law matters and can help you or someone you care for. Call them today and let them know I sent you. 440-585-1600. That's 440-585-1600. Call them today.
Tired of the same old presentations?
Can you forward to slide 38, please?
Are you looking for a new, out-of-the-box topic for your next event? Want your group to leave inspired, informed, and satisfied? No PowerPoint presentations and dim lights here. No snoring or snoozing goes on during Pat's presentations. To help your entire group, organization, business, or church stay safe during any healthcare or hospital experience, invite Pat to speak. Pick a topic from her website or request your own. Visit her website, speakupandstayalive.com, or call Pat to discuss how she can make your next event fun, enlightening, and life-saving. Want testimonials? Go to the bulletin board link at the website for color pictures and comments from real people. Again, it's speakupandstayalive.com or call 440-725-5462. That's 440-725-5462.
You're listening to Speak Up and Stay Alive, Patient Safety Radio, and I am your hostess, Pat Rulo. I've received a few requests from listeners to talk about the health effects of dental fillings, specifically the ill effects associated with mercury. Well, as usual, I have the perfect guest to share his findings with us. He is Russ Tanner, the founder of Global Skywatch, an organization raising awareness about the many dangers of geoengineering. Russ suffered and recovered from mercury toxicity and educates others on how to do the same. He has been interviewed on numerous radio and internet programs and has published articles and given lectures on the dangers of amalgam fillings, mercury toxicity, geoengineering-related illnesses, and geopolitics. So with that, we welcome you to the show, Russ.
Hi, Pat. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Now, Russ, there is a definite tie between what is being sprayed in the sky via chemtrails. Mercury is one of the toxins. There's mercury in vaccines, mercury in the new CFL light bulbs, should one break, mercury in our dental fillings in fish, and at this point in time, it's inescapable and is causing little-known health effects. Now, we're always interested to find out how and why our guests have become experts on their topics by having them share a bit of their journey with us. So if you don't mind, tell us why you know so much about mercury poisoning from dental fillings.
Well, between 1995 and 2000, I started becoming increasingly sick. And I was a guy who lifted weights every day. I played racquetball. I cycled. I was very athletic, very healthy. And I started gaining weight. I started having terrible fatigue. I started having memory loss issues. I started having digestive issues. I started having feelings of feeling hot all the time, sweating, grinding my teeth, which is called bruxism. Having terrible insomnia issues, heartburn, cracking joints, muscle pain, fears of confrontation, fears of and phobias, very light sleep. I couldn't get deep sleep cycles. My immune system was getting weaker and weaker, had candida issues, tinnitus ringing in the ears, and it went on and on. And these symptoms just kept growing and growing, and I did not know. I could not figure out for 5 years what was going on with me. And one day, a friend told me about mercury in fillings. I was talking to her about my symptoms, and she says, "You're having mercury poisoning." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Yeah, those fillings in your mouth, they have mercury." I'm like, "What? What? They have mercury?" Because I knew, I have enough of a science background just from my own personal interest to know that mercury is extremely poisonous. So I immediately started doing research, found some stories on the internet from other people who had recovered from all of the same symptoms I had from after getting their fillings out. It was caused by the mercury in the fillings. And so I had my fillings out just a few weeks later. I had them safely removed, went on a detox plan, and within 24 hours, 85 to 90% of my symptoms vanished, absolutely vanished. And within the next 3 months, my memory came back to a point I'd never had before. My energy levels, my fears and phobias disappeared. I felt like Superman for the first time in my life, and it was absolutely incredible. I realized how pervasive mercury is in our culture because virtually everybody is mercury toxic from one source or another. And so I started researching, and I started connecting the dots between numerous diseases and mercury. And in fact, Dr. Hal Huggins, which is one of the pioneers in this area, now I came across his statement, which I agree completely. And this is why this is such an important topic that I'm glad you're covering, is that mercury can be tied to 200 of the most common diseases today.
And yet, who would suspect?
Exactly. It's right in front of your face. In fact, it's in your mouth.
It's in your mouth, yeah.
Or it's in your tattoos, or it's in your vaccine, or it's in that coal-burning power plant, or if you break a CFL, one of those curly Q new light bulbs in your home, according to a Maine study, it probably is intoxicating your home above limits that would shut down a factory.
Exactly. So isn't that interesting that they did away with the incandescent bulbs and are pushing those? Light bulbs break.
That's right. I mean, every 5 years somebody breaks a light bulb in their house. That means that, within 10 years you're going to have 80% of the homes in the United States are going to be mercury toxic. So if you're going to go buy a home, you had better bring a mercury meter with you and make sure you're not walking into a disease-causing factory.
Oh my gosh, I never thought of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that serious.
Wow. See, now we encourage our listeners to have some sort of an RF meter to measure EMFs and radiation within their homes, and especially if you're going to buy a new home, to make sure you don't have any hidden cell towers hanging around. But wow, I never thought about the mercury aspect of it. And you say on your website, and I found this to be astounding, many insurance plans currently only cover mercury-based fillings?
Yes, especially the state-sponsored plans will not cover anything, so they're forced other than mercury-based amalgam fillings. So people are being forced, low-income people are being forced to have these fillings, even though they're going to lead to many more problems down the line, many more diseases, many more problems down the line.
And then to compound that, you also say on your website that dental fillings, you said, did you know that the American Dental Association owns the patent for these fillings?
Right. The patent is long since expired, but they, according to Dr. Hal Huggins, made about $50 million a year from the ADA's own patent on amalgam fillings. And they were eventually brought to court, and in court they said this. They said that they owe no duty of care to the public for any damage caused by amalgam fillings because they do not manufacture or install it. So we all know that the ADA has promoted, for dentists, they have promoted the quote-unquote safety of amalgam fillings, and so dentists have been lied to, and yet they say we have no duty of care for the protection of the public. This is how they're getting away with it.
Wow. Wow. Now, you've got these dentists that should be aware of it. I mean, if you and I and the rest of the public is somewhat aware of this, obviously a dentist should. This is what their job is. Why are not more dentists moving away from the mercury fillings, or are they?
Well, they are. There's good news and there's bad news. The good news is that many countries around the world have outlawed amalgam fillings for decades. In the United States, over 52% of dentists right now don't even use them anymore.
Okay.
They're afraid of liability, and they become aware of how toxic that they are, and they don't want to touch them. Unfortunately, there's a stubborn group of dentists who still stick by the ADA's position that mercury coming off of these fillings is safe, and they just continue to use them. So there is a movement away from them, but unfortunately there are some dentists who are just stubbornly holding on.
Mm-hmm. And interesting for our listeners to know, I was reading a study that said about 75% of adults have dangerous silver fillings. There's approximately 1,000 milligrams of mercury in the typical silver filling. This is nearly 1 million times more mercury than is present in contaminated seafood, and that most people don't realize that the mercury amalgams slowly release mercury vapor. So every time you chew, mercury vapor is released and quickly finds its way into your bloodstream, which causes oxidative processes in your tissues. And so I guess, is it perhaps the older the filling, the worse it is?
Well, there are a number of factors. According to the CDC, between 3 and 17 micrograms per liter of mercury are released from every dental filling 24 hours a day. And what happens is this accumulates in your body over time, so you may not show any immediate symptoms. Now, oftentimes you will show symptoms, and like we talk about our teenagers who have all kinds of hormonal problems, we call them, when they're growing up, and they just blame them on, those are just growth changes. Well, what people don't put together is that they began having these problems at the same time that their amalgam fillings are installed. And so they start staying in bed until 11, they become maybe stubborn and obstinate, they're lazy, and these are all symptoms of mercury toxicity. It interferes with your thyroid, interferes with your iodine production, interferes with every system in the body and your hormone balance and production. And so you have all of these things going on, and people simply don't make those connections. Mm-hmm. So yes, those amounts of mercury that are coming off those fillings, this accumulates in the body tissue, and they affect some people more than others. It depends on how much testosterone you produce. Your body produces how much glutathione your body produces. Glutathione is a substance your body naturally uses to get rid of mercury, and some people don't make as much glutathione, and so it affects different people differently. And I actually had an employee, I don't mean to stretch this out, but very interestingly, when you chew or you have hot substances, it dramatically increases the amount because the oxidative layer on the surface of those fillings gets brushed away, and so more mercury comes off. And I had an employee who was chewing gum, having a lot of mercury symptoms. I said, "You do an experiment for 3 days, don't chew gum and see what happens." And she was so astonished at the improvements in her health in 3 days that she actually came to one of my speaking engagements and gave her testimony.
Oh my gosh! There you go for you gum chewers out there, right?
Yeah, with amalgam fillings. This is a silent epidemic, and according to Dr. Hal Huggins, 200 of the most common diseases today, and I can back this up, have or are caused by mercury toxicity.
And what's scary to me is that so you go to your doctor because you're having these symptoms, and obviously that's not the first thing they're going to ask, if they even ask at all. The next thing you know, you're on this cascading waterfall of different drugs which create side effects, and you've got a new drug, and you're treating something that you don't know with all kinds of pharmaceutical drugs, which, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. The official position is that in the United States is that amalgam fillings are safe, which is completely contradictory to many European countries and South American countries who've already outlawed them. And I mean, so whether it's acne or allergies or gluten sensitivities or acid reflux or arterial sclerosis or anxiety, depression, panic attacks, bulimia, elevated calcium in your blood, cancer, I mean, there's so many diseases that can be caused. And so you go to your doctor, and in the 30s, some of the deeper processes or therapies or modalities for treating and detecting mercury toxicity in humans were written out of the pharmaceutical textbooks. And so doctors typically have only a grain of knowledge about how to detect it properly, if any, how to detect it, and then how to treat it properly.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the age-old problem where you've got physicians and dentists, they fear attack from the government or their insurance companies or their attorneys or the medical boards if they don't do what they're trained to do or supposed to do.
And rightfully so. I mean, dentists have lost their licenses over that. Happened to Dr. Hal Huggins himself and other dentists that I've heard of who've lost their licenses because they were told by the ADA, who, again, held a patent for them and made money from the manufacture of amalgam fillings. They set the policy of ethics for dentists. And so if dentists told their patients, you might be sick because of mercury from your fillings, they could lose their license.
Right. Wow. And
the very organization profiting from the manufacture of them.
Exactly. And you mentioned it's not just the physical symptom, that'd be one thing, but there's a whole host of emotional, as you said, anxiety and panic attacks. And
for me, I'm a high testosterone male, and Dr. Boyd Haley discovered that 3 out of 4 children who have autism are high testosterone, and he discovered a link between high testosterone and the inability for people to detox mercury. And when my fillings went in, I had depression. I had a lot of shyness. I was very, very shy. I felt socially awkward in social situations, so I became withdrawn. I had a lot of fears and phobias. It just profoundly affected me. Not even in the beginning. It wasn't even so much physical. It was very emotional. And the depression was very profound and very strong and affected my life all the way into my mid-30s when I discovered the problem. People need to understand how deep and far-reaching mercury toxicity is.
Right. So if anyone listening is having some of these sets of symptoms or feelings, this might be the route to at least begin to check out, yeah?
Mercury is coming from so many different sources.
Right.
And it's being antagonized by massive aluminum toxicity as well, that even when people get their fillings out now, the detox process is very slow. For me, it was about 3 months, and I was just completely recovered, and my life had changed. Today, it's taking people years to detox because they're just inundated with so much toxicity.
Well, let's talk, though, if we wanted to approach that topic of removing old mercury fillings from our teeth. Will any old dentist do?
No, any old dentist will not do. If you go to a dentist who is not trained and does not take precautions, safety precautions when removing amalgam fillings, about 50% of the people who thought they were saving a little bit of money who have called me back after trying to go to a conventional untrained dentist and having their amalgam fillings removed ended up having a chronic debilitating disease like fibromyalgia or depression or some other mercury-related disease. So you have to go to a dentist that is specially trained in safe mercury removal because you're handling the most toxic, non-radioactive substance on the planet. And in fact, laws are starting to go in place in some countries that don't even allow the patients to spit down the sinks during the dental procedures because the mercury that's coming out of your saliva is contaminating the groundwater.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, this is extremely serious, and this is so pervasive. So, yes, you have to find a dentist who really knows what they're doing, who has a good reputation. Otherwise, you could get very sick from the removal process, so be careful.
Just a little side note, you said that they couldn't spit into the sink because they'd contaminate the groundwater, but it's okay for the planes to fly around and spray the mercury chemtrails, right?
Yeah, all the metals that are being sprayed in chemtrails. And the amazing thing is that I have a friend who used to actually mix the amalgams in a dental office, now has MS symptoms and is perpetually on pharmaceuticals now to try to treat all of her symptoms. But this is the mentality is that, hey, amalgams in the bottle, when you get the amalgam material and you mix it and you put it in people's mouths, hey, it's perfectly safe and effective. But that amalgam that's left over at the end of the day is handled like a toxic substance. It has to be specially shipped, specially registered, and it is a toxic substance. It's just astonishing, the dichotomy right in front of our faces.
Yep. So if folks are considering this, they need a biological dentist, and they're probably hard to come by. And I think I'm going to put some links on our website, like the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicity and Consumers for Dental Choice. Do you have any suggestions regarding that?
Yes, the IAOMT that you just mentioned is a good place to go. They have a list of references to dentists that people can find who have trained. Now, just because a dentist has been trained doesn't mean he follows the procedures. So this is what I tell people, is interview your dental office. I spent hours on the phone with my dental office, and if a dental office is not willing to spend time with you, then don't work with them.
Right.
You want people who care about what they're doing. They want to educate you because they really care about you. Mm-hmm. And if they care about you, they'll spend some time on the phone with you and make sure that they take a lot of precautions, like rubber dam. And my dentist put a mixture of chlorella and activated charcoal under my tongue over and over again during the removal process, and used an air filtration system that sucked the mercury vapor away from the work area. And you should see, my dentist and his assistant were dressed, they looked like hazmat people. They had full gas masks on, fully covered garb. They fully covered my body. I had goggles on. This is how my dentist removed it, and this is how they dressed during the procedure. This is how toxic it is. So you have to choose your dentist very carefully.
Absolutely. And if there's any take home here or takeaway for our listeners, that if you're concerned and you're looking to have your fillings removed, find a qualified biological dentist. I will put that listing on our website. And meantime, though, we should always ask our dentist to switch to mercury-free dentistry. And if you work for a company that covers dental fillings, ask if they will cover composites or alternatives to amalgam.
Yeah, absolutely. All dental materials fall into about 5 different categories. You've got porcelain, you've got methylcrylate, you've got the BIS GMAs, you've got gold, copper, alloys. Some of these are worse than others. They're all far better than mercury amalgam, but there are some things you want to be careful. You don't generally want to mix gold and copper with mercury amalgam because that really accentuates the rate at which the mercury comes out of the tissue. Mm-hmm. The BIS GMAs have received, this is a plastic that has received a lot of bad press for its cancer causing estrogenic properties. The methylcrylates and the porcelains are kind of the two that are winning out as the safer types.
Lots to know. So any old dentist will not do. So you need to do your homework. All right. Well, Russ, where can we find out more about you and mercury and dental fillings?
I've got several websites. I would say a couple websites, mercurytalk.com. We have some articles there that help people, again, just there to help people become aware of this problem. There's some great books and reading materials at amalgamillness.com. Those are a couple places you can go, and I have contact information for myself on those sites if anybody wants to ask any questions. I talk to people for free just to give them information and help with solving this problem in their lives.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Are we missing anything that we should be talking about?
Well, it's a huge subject. I mean, detox is really important. You have to be very careful when you're detoxing mercury. You have to go slow. You have to know what to take, what to avoid. So mercury detox is a big and very important subject to cover as well in this area.
And I know we're just, again, touching the tip of the iceberg here, but it's a pleasure to have you on the program, and we should have you back again to maybe do some follow-up.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for covering this important subject.
Well, it's my pleasure as well. And folks, I'm sure there's not one person listening who does not have a filling in his or her teeth and who needs to think about what we discussed today. So, again, thanks a lot, Russ.
Thank you so much.
Listen to Pat Rulo and Speak Up and Stay Alive RadiOh. Stay safe from little-known healthcare and hospital hazards. To learn more, go to speakupandstayalive.com. That's speakupandstayalive.com.
News and views we choose to share with you. Welcome to a new segment we're going to occasionally add to the show just to keep us fresh and keep you thinking. If you're just joining us, I'm Pat Rulo, your hostess who keeps patients and healthcare providers up to date on all things patient safety. Today, I'm going to focus on nurses. So let's begin with hospital noise. Hospitals aren't known for being quiet places, yet they weren't always so noisy either. Like many innovations, alarms were first developed to provide benefit to an exceedingly small group of high-risk patients. Encouraged by the benefits, the medical community expanded this model to other low-risk populations. And the consequence of this well-intentioned generalization is epitomized in the din of chirps, beeps, bells, and gongs that typify hospitals today. So says Vineet Chopra, MD, and Lawrence McMahon, Jr., MD, in a column for the Journal of the American Medical Association. Well, indeed, 30 years ago, 6 was the average number of alarms in a typical ICU, intensive care unit. But by 2011, that number had skyrocketed to 40. Whoa. But who really hears them? A major consequence of the high frequency of alarms in hospital units is that you might not even hear them anymore. Nurses and others who spend a great deal of time in these units tend to become desensitized to their noise. And as a result, their response time to the future alarms tends to slow down. Now, managing all of this noise is an overwhelming task. The nurses responsible for these alarms must figure out their meaning and then prioritize them, respond, and distinguish the actionable from the non-actionable. And not only do many alarms require a trip to the bedside to figure this out and reassure the patient, they sidetrack busy nurses who are engaged in other tasks, raising the risk for making an error and cross-contaminations if the nurse by accident touches the equipment before washing his or her hands. So it's not difficult to understand why nurses who must respond repeatedly to these alarms are sometimes driven to unsafe actions, such as turning down the alarm volumes, widening the alarm parameters, or even shutting some alarms off altogether. The problem has become so pervasive that alarm fatigue has topped the ECRI Institute's 2015 list of the top 10 patient safety concerns. The Institute recently launched a new alarm readiness validation service to help hospitals satisfy the Joint Commission's requirements. The Joint Commission approved the goal in 2013, and Phase 1, which required that hospitals make alarm management a priority, went into effect in 2014. And now, hospitals must be ready to develop and implement specific policies and procedures and educate employees about alarm system management. Now, you may remember a segment with a young girl who I had on the show many times, who created a YouTube video that begs the question, "Why does everything beep?" by Morgan Gleason. Let's take a listen.
Hello, my name is Morgan Gleason, and I'm here to talk to you today about something that is not patient-centered in the healthcare world, and that thing is the IV pump. Whenever your IV pump has an issue, like my issue with it is that I get a certain med that is very frothy and bubbly, so in the middle of the night, like air bubbles get stuck in the tubing, so every time the air bubble gets stuck, the IV pump starts beeping extremely loudly, very louder than your alarm clock loud. So that is very annoying, especially when you're sleeping, because it wakes you up like it's an alarm clock. And also, when you have a headache, it really doesn't do well because, sound, really loud noises hurt your head. So it just doesn't make sense why it would beep in the patient's room instead of out by the nurses where they could actually do something about it. The patients aren't able to do anything except press a silence button on it, which is a little button that only kind of makes the beeping stop for a couple minutes at a time, maybe 2 or 3 minutes at the most. And if your nurse doesn't come within those 2 or 3 minutes, then your IV pump ends up beeping the entire time for over and over and over again until somebody finally comes in and fixes it. But then when you do need the nurse because it's beeping, you have to press this button. It's the nurse button on the little remote. And it, when you press it, it goes out, it gets sent, your remote signal sends to somebody sitting in a desk outside the hall. And that person is supposed to page the nurse for your nurse to get the page to come to your room, and then they have to fix it. And a couple of times it's happened to me. It doesn't happen very often. They're normally pretty good about it. But a couple of times it's happened where the person at the desk will turn off the light outside of your room, so you're waiting for 30 or 40 minutes at a time without anybody knowing that you need anything, which is really annoying because you've been waiting for a long time, you're in pain, the thing is beeping, it just doesn't make sense. No, it really is annoying, actually. Also, there's a pain button on the remote, which does the exact same thing as the nurse button, and it doesn't make sense that they would have a pain button if it does the same thing as the other button. The people still come on and ask you what you need. Like, do you need anything? Do you need your nurse to come? And you're like, yes, I pressed the pain button. I'd like something for my pain. And they're like, well, I don't know. It just said the same thing as the nurse button. So that's not very helpful at all. And yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. But I'll post new videos soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Well, I think all of us can relate to that. Well, now next. Many physicians and registered nurse practitioners, midwives, and physician assistants reported to work while being sick, despite recognizing that this could put patients at risk, according to a result of a small survey published online by JAMA Pediatrics. The reason why physicians reported working while sick included not wanting to let their colleagues down, staffing concerns, not wanting to let patients down, fear of being ostracized by colleagues, and concerned about the continuity of care. Well, those are all very noble reasons if you ask me. That illustrates the complex social and logistic factors that cause this behavior. As a patient, all I can say is that if your healthcare provider appears to be ill, especially a hospital nurse who will be with you all day or night, ask that someone else tend to you. I know that's a rough thing to do, but the consequences could jeopardize your health. Next, we have the Spring 2015 Leapfrog Hospital Safety Score indicates that hospitals have made statistically significant improvements in patient safety since the fall of 2014, but room for improvement exists on a number of issues. Leapfrog analyzed publicly available national performance measures for more than 2,500 hospitals to arrive at the scores. They found that about 31% of the hospitals earned an A, 28% earned a B, 34% earned a C, 6% earned a D, and nearly 1% earned an F. Among all hospitals analyzed, 182 hospitals have recently received an A grade for patient safety. Now, the hospitals have to focus on a collaborative practice, encouraging anyone on the team to speak up if something is not right, where nurses and physicians work together to address quality and safety concerns. And I know that that's a problem, where the staff are fearful to stop the line and say, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. There is a hierarchy mentality that seriously affects patient safety. And I say that no one, not a nurse, aide, transporter, housekeeper, no one should feel intimidated to speak up for fear of retribution. So I encourage you to check the scores of hospitals you are considering for care at the Leapfrog website, and that is leapfroggroup.org, leapfroggroup.org. I've interviewed the founder and president several times on this program. You may remember Leah Binder, and if you would like to hear her again, simply visit the archives page at our website, speakupandstayalive.com. Actually, we have a little free stuff area on the site where you can locate leapfroggroup.org and many other hospital evaluation websites as well. Just go to speakupandstayalive.com. Here's an interesting one. How much do nurses make today compared to recent years? While nursing remains one of the most respected professions and demand for healthcare services continues to climb as the population ages and more people obtain insurance coverage, nurse salary rates remain essentially stagnant, according to several studies. A 2014 salary survey found 70% of nurses received a raise this year, and the mean year-over-year increase for staff nurse was 2.3%. Now, as a reference point, the average annual inflation rate for the past 11 years is 2.38%. The survey also found benefit packages were being compressed. A 2014 Hay Group annual healthcare compensation study, collecting salary data from more than 1,000 organizations, found that nurses received increases of between 1.9 and 2.2%. The Hay study also found that patient satisfaction incentives were a factor in nurse compensation, and that more nurses in leadership positions are receiving incentives in addition to base compensation. I'm a big fan of nurses. They are the front-line caretakers, and they often know much more about the patient and the patient's family than the doctors. They are some of the most influential people in healthcare and really should have a bigger voice and a better pay. And that's why I'm often disappointed at the behavior of some nurses, especially RNs, who either feel that they are too busy or too important to really tend to the patient, handing off the duty to the aide. I've seen many RNs do little more than administer meds and change IVs. Other than that, their patients are left to survive with the help of the aides who have very little training. And that's scary. So if there is some way for hospitals to expand their incentive plans to cover groups of employees that include nurses, nurse managers, and heck, even the STRNs, the LPNs, aides, everyone should be given the opportunity to distinguish performance and get paid properly for their contributions. Go nurses! And finally, during the preliminary rounds of the 95th Annual Miss America competition this year, Miss Colorado decided to trade her makeup and dress for a stethoscope and scrubs to show the judges her heart more than her talent. In a break from the usual comedy routine, song and dance, Kelly Johnson, age 22, delivered the rare monologue during the talent portion of the pageant, which I found to be quite refreshing. Let's take a listen.
Performing an original monologue, here is Kelly Johnson, Miss Colorado.
Every nurse has a patient that reminds them why they became a nurse in the first place. Mine was Joe. Joe was in the beginning stages of Alzheimer's. He had moments with and moments without his memory. But the hardest part about the aging condition for Joe were his night terrors. He would wake up in the middle of the night screaming absolute bloody murder. But if I just went in there and held his hand for a few moments, I could usually get him to calm down. But then he wanted to talk. He would ask me if I could change his treatments, and I'd say, "No, Joe, I can't. I'm just a nurse." "Well, what about my medications? Can you fix those?" And I'd say, "No, Joe, I can't. I'm just a nurse." But because I couldn't do those things for Joe, we connected on other levels. He would ask me about volleyball. We would talk about his grandbabies. And he would tease me about being the only nurse on the unit that can reach the gauze on the top shelf. It was a lot of laughs with Joe. But then one night, everything changed. I found him in his room crying. And I went over to him and I lifted his head up out of his hands and I said, "Joe, I know that this is really hard, but you are not defined by this disease. You are not just Alzheimer's. You are still Joe." And he looked right back at me, almost to look through me, and said, "Nurse Kelly, then the same goes for you. Although you say it all the time, you are not just a nurse. You are my nurse, and you have changed my life because you have cared about me." And that's when it hit me. Patients are people with family and friends, and I don't want to be a nurse that ever pretends, because you're not a room number and a diagnosis when you're in the hospital. You're a person, very first. And Joe reminded me that day that I'm a lifesaver. I'm never going to be just a nurse.
Miss Colorado.
Wow. Simple, honest, powerful, and no tap dancing. You know, her comments to her patient that she is just a nurse is really rather indicative of the entire atmosphere within healthcare. If each person believed and behaved as if they were the most important component within the system, we wouldn't need patient satisfaction surveys, scorings, incentives, disincentives. No one is just a nurse, just a housekeeper, just an aide, just a transporter, just a receptionist. Do you realize how important just a receptionist really is to a frightened patient or a family member? How just a receptionist sets the stage for the entire experience? How if just a receptionist believed in his or her importance and behaved accordingly, how that would not only alter the patient's experience, it would also improve the receptionist's view of his or her job. So let's everyone elevate our self-importance to where it really should be, on top of the heap. And if the culture in your hospital or facility doesn't appreciate and value that, then work to change it. No one should, in quotes, know their place, because everyone is equally important within the walls of a hospital. I've been hired to work with one of the most well-known hospitals in the world to address this very situation, a negative culture with stratospheres of importance. It does nothing to serve the patient or the staff, and it begins with you. It's almost so simple that I really don't know what else to say. So I vote that every single healthcare person, whether the CEO, chief of staff, surgeon, RN, physician, or nurse's aide, housekeeper, transporter, cafeteria server, parking lot attendant, get rid of the thought or the words, just a. You are not just anything. You are everything to a fragile patient or family member. You are the most important person in a patient's world. Your attitude, your demeanor, your every word and nuance is everything. And it's really unfair to you and that person if you forget that. Well, so there you have it. Some news and views that I choose to share with you. Well, we are so out of time once again, but it was a great show today, and I'm so happy you joined us. And I encourage you to come back next week. Same time, same place. But you know me, never the same information. And speaking of information, if you want to hear more, invite me to speak to your group, club, your business, church, hospital. We will have a fun time together as we learn how to stay safe during every healthcare or hospital encounter. Just give me a call, 440-725-5462, 440-725-5462. Until we meet again, I hope you have a healthy and a happy week, free from cone beam x-rays and mercury in your teeth. I am Pat Rouleau, and I am your guide to safe and successful healthcare and hospital encounters.
Listen to Pat Rouleau and Speak Up and Stay Alive Radio. Stay safe from little-known healthcare and hospital hazards. To learn more, go to speakupandstayalive.com. That's speakupandstayalive.com.